Welcome to the Savvy Dentist podcast with Dr. Jesse Green, the show where great dentistry meets great business. Listen in each week as we bring you an inspiring person who will share their story, ideas and business techniques to help you create a practice and a life you love. And now introducing your host, Dr. Jesse Green.
Hello everyone, it's Jesse Green here. Welcome back to SavvyDentist.com and to the Savvy Dentist podcast. Wonderful to have your company for another episode of the show. Now, if you want to have a practice and a life, then I'm going to encourage you to come along to the Savvy Dentist Facebook group, because in that group, we're going to share with you the strategies, the tools, and all the resources you need to help you grow your practice, scale your practice, and create a business that you love, as well as a life that you love. So all you need to do is head across to Facebook, find Savvy Dentist in the search bar, answer the questions on entry, and we'd love to welcome you in there. Now, my guest today is Marissa Roberts, and you can find her at marissaroberts.com, and we're talking all about simplifying your business so that you can scale your business. And what Marissa's really going to talk a lot about in this podcast are three key things. We're going to talk about profitability, we're going to talk about processes, and we're going to talk about constant and continual improvement so that you get the foundation right in order to scale. Because we know that when you scale a practice, that complexity scales, mess scales, and we only want to scale the good things. At Savvy Dentist, that's our kind of niche. We help people scale their practice. And what I really enjoyed about this conversation with Marissa is her depth of understanding about the scaling process. And she shares some really good advice, some really good strategies, some really good hints and tips. And on top of that, she's got a 3-part audio series on her website, which you may want to avail yourself of as well. So all you need to do is go to marissaroberts.com, find that 3-part audio series and have a listen away. But for now, let's get into our conversation with Marissa so that you can simplify your practice and scale it up. Here she is. Marissa Roberts, thank you so much for taking the time to come and join us on the Savvy Dentist podcast, all the way from Newcastle. How's things for you?
Oh, Jesse, thank you for having me. Great day today. Not great weather up here today, but it's still pretty nice. Newcastle's always just a lovely place to be. And I work from home, so I'm nice and comfy while we're chatting.
Well, I reckon if you can't be happy in Newcastle, then there's something wrong, because it's got something like 8 beaches, wonderful cafes, vibrant culture. You know, there's a lot going for Newcastle. So I can understand why people migrate there. And we're talking off air about how I nearly moved there a few years ago, and it's a great place. So hopefully I can get up there sometime soon.
Yes.
Now, Marissa, what I'm really interested to talk to you today about is simplifying and scaling. And before we get into what that looks like and how to do it and all the rest of it, I'm curious to ask about your backstory, because most people have a fairly, I guess, non-linear backstory with zig and with zag and all those sorts of things. How did you kind of get to this point where you were thinking simplification and scaling?
Oh, that is such a good question. I am quite obsessed with finding ways to simplify, and it's a little bit because I have a touch of laziness in me and I like to do a whole lot of nothing. Reading, puzzles, Netflix. I go to the movies every Thursday while the kids are at school. But my need for simplifying pretty much started when I became a mum, right? So 13 odd years ago now. I was always a pretty organised person before. I was good at making things easy and simple, and then throw 2 babies and toddlers into the mix and whoa, it all just totally went out the window. Suddenly I was like, I'm working 24/7. I've got no time for anything. And that kind of flowed on to how I work as well. You know, pre-kids I was corporate. A corporate facilitator, loved the job, worked long hours, loved every minute of it. As soon as I had the kids, you know, that work-life balance juggle was a really, really tricky one. You know, suddenly people don't want you to travel for work anymore because you're a mum. So you miss the fun stuff, but they want you to work late hours because you still have to fit the work roster. So I'm like, I'm not seeing my kids, I'm not getting the fun side. That's it. I'm going to go be an entrepreneur. And then, started my first business and burnt out within a couple of months.
Oh, wow.
Because I would say broadly within 6 months, I totally burnt out, but really first 2 or 3, I was already really feeling the struggle. It was really ironic because my first business at Beautifully Organised is, you know, I would go to other mums' houses and help them organise their home so that their day would flow smoothly with babies and toddlers. Super ironic because I would spend 6 hours a day doing that and then come home exhausted.
Yes.
Couldn't play with my own kids. My house was a mess. So at that point, that's when I started going, I need to find easier ways to make money, have a great income, have a bit of balance at home. I need my business to run smoothly without me working till, midnight, 1 a.m. on the laptop while everybody else is asleep. So that's what inspired me to start simplifying. At that business, that's where I tested and experimented and tried all of my strategies. And now that's pretty much 90% automated because it's all based on digital courses. I teach people my tips on video instead of going to their house and doing it themselves, because my customers are like, how am I going to get you here? The baby's sleeping, the toddler's up. How are we going to find time to work together? Now they don't need to. They can watch whenever they want. And that freed me up to start sharing what's working in business. How are we saving time? How are we saving effort? How are we stressing less? And that's where the Simpler Business podcast came from. I just like to ramble on about stuff that makes my life and business better.
Fantastic. Well, I understand that. I like to ramble on a bit too, because having conversations is probably the highlight of my day. I enjoy it immensely. Why is it that from time to time we tend to overcook and overcomplicate things?
Oh, it's totally just overwhelm, isn't it? It's that feeling like we have to keep up with other businesses, or we have to reach certain achievements. Or a lot of my clients feel like if they lose momentum, done, their business is over, because they see so much going on online and on social media, and they really feel like they have to keep up with everybody else or be better than everybody else. It's a lot of internal pressure to put on yourself. And sometimes we can forget that the whole reason we started a business is because we enjoy what we do and we want to help people, and that's the foundation of it. But you get so caught up in everything that you see, and it's 24/7 that you can access this information online. There's no downtime. There's no time to switch off without feeling guilty about it. So I think a lot of people really struggle with that.
It's really interesting as well, because I think, there's a lot of people that want to scale up their business. And, before we can scale up, we do need to simplify, because complexity scales pretty quickly too. Chaos scales very effectively, I've seen and witnessed many times over. So I wanted to just talk a bit about the importance of creating a foundation from which you can scale. Could you just talk a little bit about, I suppose, the pre-work before scaling?
Oh, yeah. I think it's really important that the foundations have to be solid, because let's face it, if you're not making money in your business, you don't want to scale that part.
Bingo, yes.
You don't want to scale the expenses and no profitability. If things are reactionary in your business, if you're just reacting to things throughout the day as they pop up, whether that be patient or customer needs or staff or team issues or issues with your stock management or your time management, if you're reacting to all of those, but you don't actually have a system and process in place to reduce it from happening or to handle it smoothly, then you're right. When you scale, the chaos scales as well, the stress scales as well. And suddenly, I think a lot of business owners, we think if we work more or we work longer hours or we just keep working and working and working until we can't anymore, we think that's how we're going to handle anything. But actually, if you take a little bit of time and build a buffer into your work week to actually stop and think about what feels difficult, what feels tricky, what feels clunky. I always say to my clients, if you start with how you're feeling, the foundations kind of work themselves out. We have 3 areas that we focus on that tend to smooth things out in terms of business, your profitability, your processes, your continuous improvement. If they build time into their work week to focus on those things outside of the moment that they're happening, that's when it becomes a lot smoother and easier foundation-wise in your business. That's where you kind of spot your gaps then, and you start to learn what you need to do.
Yeah, there's a fair bit in there, and you've given me lots of entry points into the conversation, so thank you.
Probably too many.
No, but I know you run your own podcast, so you'll appreciate as the host why that's a good thing, because there's lots of angles we can approach this conversation from. So one of the things that I'm always fond of thinking about is like a hierarchy of needs, and we talk about profitability, scalability, then valuable. So profitable, scalable, valuable is kind of like our process. But you've touched on that first one, profitability, and I always think that, as you say, you don't want to scale an unprofitable business because you just go further into the hole. So I thought perhaps it might be worthwhile just starting a conversation there, because I think that is a bit of a baseline. What are the things that you see that people make mistakes with when they're trying to grow their profitability or even establish their profitability? Where do people come unstuck, and what are you seeing working? What are you seeing not working?
Oh, yeah. Okay. So a lot of people I work with, they approach profitability as, it's very, very simple in their minds. I need to get customers, service those customers, take payment from those customers. But then their thinking kind of ends and they put themselves right back at the beginning again. I've got to find more customers, new customers, the next one, service that person with what they need, take their payment, move on to the next one. It's like the relationship is like one moment in time. People forget that if you've given somebody a really good experience, they're going to want to come back to you, but their lives are really busy and they're stressed out and they've got lots going on. So it's up to you to not only give them a great experience, but encourage them to come back. And that's where a lot of people kind of slip up. Like we know in our heads we should be doing that, but do we have a process that means that it happens smoothly? So big gap there is what I see all the time. You know, are you booking the person in for their next checkup in 6 months when they've seen you today? Are you actively sending your reminders and using systems to text them and let them know that their appointment's coming up? Are you, while they're in the practice with you, are you giving them an incentive to give you a great review on Google? You know, it might be as easy as 5 or 10% off their service charge or their fee for the consult in return for a Google review or a happy photo of their kid in their dentist chair, that sort of thing. It's that sort of getting out of the moment feeling. And when you start to take those actions, I find that's where your profitability really comes up. It's not that initial experience that they have, it's the extras. It's the first time I went to a dentist, for example, and realized that there were teeth whitening options and cosmetic things that I could do, not just getting me out of that moment of, oh, I've got a toothache today. It was the long-term approach to their relationship with me. It was the fact that they could handle my government rebates for my kids' appointments for me, so I didn't even have to think about it. That's what's made me a loyal customer to the practice I go to, because they've made my life easier and I love going back to them again and again. And I had a 15-year gap with dentist visits because I was scared to go.
Okay, well, welcome back.
Sounds terrible.
Welcome back. It's good that you're back. And it's really interesting, isn't it? Because in my former life, I used to run a marketing agency for dentists, and there was always an obsession around, I need new patients, I need more new patients, and every problem on the planet could be solved with more new patients. To your point, I observed, like you, that if you can retain those customers, or in our case, patients, the money is really in the back end as the relationship matures, as the relationship develops and trust grows and develops and that relationship deepens, then patients, such as yourself, will continue to frequent the practice, refer family and friends, take up additional services as and when they need them, and you become, I guess, the trusted advisor for that particular patient. But that's about having a process to make sure it happens systematically. So let's talk a little bit about processes, because I think we all understand the value of process. Most people would say, yeah, get it, systems, Jesse, rah, 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 I'm chanting the chant, I've read the E-Myth, I'm good to go. But I don't know if you've seen this. Maybe this is a dental thing, maybe it's broader, you'll be able to speak to this more than me. But sometimes I see practices with either no systems or systems that are written and documented that no one follows. Do you see that as well?
All the time. And that's why I say to people, when you're creating processes for your business, and it starts a business model and then it goes down to actual specific small things. They have papers and papers and documents and documents. No one even knows where to find them, let alone read them. And the thing that I hear from team members and staff when I'm working with business owners who have a team working for them, if I take the business owner out of the room and I talk to the staff, they say the same thing over and over again. We're too busy with our everyday work to stop and look these processes up, which is super ironic, because if they were following the processes, they wouldn't be so flat out busy, because the systems and the process would take care of themselves pretty much with just a little action here and there. Things would be smoother, but they don't have time to stop and find them or stop and follow them because they're too busy reacting to things that are happening. And I can't blame them for that. They've got people right in front of them, or they're short on time, or someone's called in sick and they're trying to juggle. So it really becomes a staff issue, like a staff morale issue, and a customer experience issue that affects the business as a whole, because the systems and processes aren't being followed as a result of those issues. It's like a wheel, a hamster wheel that you never really get off if you don't take the time to stop and focus on it.
So I guess that's the question, is how do you kind of get that pattern interrupt to say, hey, if we keep going like this, we're just going to be peddling without getting further. And one of the challenges that I hear, I'm sure you hear, is, but if I take time out, I'm either A, too busy, or B, it's going to cost me lost revenue, and so on and so forth. And I mean, I think we both would probably agree that any lost revenue is not really lost revenue, because they're going to gain a whole lot more back. But to someone listening to this, what would you say to them if they're experiencing those thoughts?
Oh, that's such a good point, because people do stress out like that. The pattern that I normally follow with people is say to them, okay, if you're already providing a really good experience with your customers, let's look at your pricing first. Mm-hmm. Can you raise your pricing just a little so that you have less people to serve, so that you can build buffer time into your staff day or your week to look at these sorts of things? Because a lot of the times I think business owners are competing on price, right? I need to just undercut my competitors a little bit so that I can get new customers in. But you're trying to cram so many people in so that you can make the same amount of money. And then that's when you have no time. That's when you have no time for improvement. When I say to people, just up your prices a little bit, trust me, if you're giving a good experience, your practice is going to feel better for them anyway. So they're still going to come back. They don't. As a loyal customer, I don't even know what my dentists charge me at the moment. I will happily pay whatever they do, because when I go there, the practice is, and it's an inviting environment and people aren't stressed out and rushing around. I've never thought I'd say this about dental before. I love being there. The waiting room is lovely. The experience in the chair is lovely. My dentist takes the time to walk me through what's happening now, but then also look at, okay, so in the future, we might be looking at this next or this next. The experience is better. So I will pay anything for that because it's the outcome I'm getting. That's the important thing, not exactly what they're working on my tooth. So from a customer experience point of view, if you're raising your prices and it's a good experience, no one's going to mind, right? Less customers, more buffer time. You can schedule in time then to look at your processes and systems. So it's as easy as that first step. It is one that takes guts to do it.
Yep.
Because taking the leap to raise your prices, because you think that's got nothing to do with productivity, raising prices, but actually it's that flow-on effect that makes a difference. But people freeze at that moment. I don't want to raise my prices because no one will come back. It's not actually the case. Just give it a go, raise it a little, and then schedule in regular pricing reviews so that it never feels like a big deal anymore. You know, that itself should be a process. Every 6 months or every year, we sit down and we look at our pricing options and the customer experience we're giving, and we tweak it that way. And that takes the pressure off too.
Raising your prices, I think, is a really important strategy to do, as you say, every 6 months or every 12 months or whatever frequency. There is some anxiety that comes up when people go through that. If you're constantly trying to undercut the competition, there's only one direction that you're going to go, because then they're going to try and undercut you, and then we're in a race to the bottom. There's that old joke, I'm sure you've heard it, like the barber that does, $20 haircuts, and the guy across the road says we do $15 haircuts, and he does $10 haircuts, and then the other guy responds with $5 haircuts, and eventually he just says we fix $5 haircuts.
Yeah, I love that one.
Yeah, it's an oldie, but I guess the thing is that when you're in that race to the bottom, or when you're constantly trying to compete on price, it is a bit of a race you don't want to win. And I think there's some anxiety in the dental marketplace, particularly about positioning their fee structure at a particular level, particularly at the moment, with the cost of inflation and all those other cost of goods going up and inflation and so on. But to your point, no one notices it. We raise our prices routinely in our practice. No one notices it. And there's a lot of price elasticity there, particularly if you've got a relationship with the patient. And I think that's your point, is because your relationship with your dentist is so strong, you're not there because of the price. You're there because of the relationship. Is that a reasonable assertion?
Absolutely. I'm there because of how they make me feel and the pressure that they take off my life admin of my dentistry needs, my dental needs, and that of my kids. So we go to a practice that specializes and markets. Their marketing talks about how people are scared to go to the dentist due to traumatic experiences as children, and that they work with children to make them extra comfortable. Their marketing is full of kids saying, I used to be scared, I'm not anymore. That's what brought us to them in the first place. And the fact that the experience matched, that they said that in their marketing, and it really was a comfortable, pleasant experience, completely the opposite to what we were expecting, that straight away I knew we would always go there. I was a loyal customer straight away. They could double their price and I would find a way to pay it, because the experience of taking my kids there, so smooth for me. It's like when somebody says, this is going wrong, this is going wrong, this is going wrong in my life. If somebody came up to you and said, hey, I can fix that for a couple of $100 and you don't have to do anything. Hey, take my money, right? This was the dentist version of that.
100%. Now, if your dentist is listening to this podcast and your fees have doubled between this visit and the next visit, you'll know they've been listening and they're going to go, great, Marissa's fees have now doubled. She's a keeper. I wanted to ask you, I'm kidding, of course. My question, I don't know who your dentist is, but my question I want to ask is around categories of systems, because people will go, okay, well, what systems? Do I systemize every little thing, or do I kind of take a broader approach to that? At what degree of systemization, how much is too much and how much is enough?
Oh, good point. Because if you're going to bring systems into your practice, you need to make sure people can actually use them.
Yes.
And you need to make sure they're actually going to make a difference. Mm-hmm. I go super simple on this when I'm working with people, and I say, right, if you're thinking about what system should I add to my business first, I say to people, what makes you crankiest at the moment? What is the most frustrating thing about your job? What makes you want to pull your hair out when it happens? Because a system will probably fix that for you. And because that will smooth out the thing that's bugging you the most, that's when you'll get that mental space and that extra buffer then to move on to the next thing. So go with what makes you really, really cranky.
Perfect.
And let's find a system for that first.
Okay.
Yeah. So.
And do you have any hints and tips for documentation of systems or creation of systems? How do you suggest doing it? Is it simply a checklist? What's your process for creating that?
This is an interesting one, because I, as a person, like a checklist. I like to read and do and read and do and read and do. I like to action as I go. I don't need context around what I'm clicking on or pressing on or saying out loud. As long as it's on the checklist and I follow it, I know I'm going to get a good outcome.
Yep.
That's because I'm a person who likes to action as I learn or action as I work. Sometimes I'll be working with staff who need more context. They need to know why they're being asked to do the thing that they're doing. They don't trust the system because they don't know how those steps relate to the outcome. And that's where we can come up against a wall when it comes to a team that we're working with. If they don't learn the same way that you learn and you systemize your things in a way that suits you, that's when you're going to have a little bit of trouble. So I say to people, start with the easiest way to document your process first, which is often a checklist. Then over time, add different things in. So I'm not sure if it's going to relate well to dentistry, but for example, what I'll say to some business owners is, if you're a natural talker, right, that's fine. Just record yourself talking a process step by step as you're doing it. A nice, simple system that you're using, just record yourself talking about it as you're doing it and start there. And then screenshot as you're doing it, pictures of how you're doing it, and start there. And then you've got visual ways to show people, or a recording as well as a checklist. Think about, how can I make this a good experience for the person that's going to be actioning it? And the first step is usually just to say to them, hey, when you're doing something at work, how do you like to learn how to do it? Do you like to follow a checklist? Normally I'll find that with staff, we tend to hire people that will fit the role that we're looking for. So you do have lots of different learning experiences. But once you start catering to the people that you're working with and showing, I actually do care that this is easy for you, they will then get on board and go, great, now let's make this easy for this person over here who I work with, who I notice learns in a different way. So it becomes quite holistic in the long term. But take the pressure off and think long term. A simple checklist is often the best way to start.
So I guess this ties into the continuous improvement piece as well. Is we've now got a system we're continuously improving by adding the context or the other learning styles as we go.
Yeah.
Where else do you see continuous improvement being important in the practice? I mean, I know continuous improvement as a general concept is always important, but specifically, what do you see happening in other businesses? What do you think is relevant and pertinent for this conversation?
Oh, I think a big game changer is how somebody's handling the schedule of your business, right? So if you're seeing clients in 1 or 2 hour appointments or half-hour appointments throughout the day, if somebody cancels, you have downtime. You're not making any money in that time, right? So a big thing I'll say to people is block out some time for a staff member to start calling other people who are coming in later and seeing if they want to fill that time slot, so that you don't have downtime where you're paying for staff or you're paying for, having the business open but not actually getting money coming in. A lot of people see a cancellation and think, oh, well, I've got a longer lunch now, or we're just going to sit here and chill out, or I'll go tackle some admin. But if you've got a systemized process for your admin, you don't need to jump in and do that when you've got no customers. You don't need to be relieved that the customer cancelled because you can go and do some other work. You do want to keep that income flowing in. So it's often as easy as having, say, your receptionist or one team member look at the calendar that day. And if your customers have, say, cancelled the appointment, if you're using a text-based system, or they've rung up and said, I can't come in, great, let's take a look at the people who are due to come in, tomorrow or a few days from now, and see if they want to come in and fill that spot. Or take a look at people who are coming in at the end of the day and see if they want to fill that morning spot so that you can finish early if you need to, or have a buffer for emergency cases that might come in.
Yeah. Okay. I love that. That's fantastic. So the whole scheduling thing is critically important, because in dentistry, our budgets are really linked to our schedule, as you can appreciate. And so I really like the way that you've got that improvement system around there. Where else do you think improvement kind of lends itself naturally to businesses? Is it around training? Is it around team development? Is it around leadership? Where do you see that need for continuous improvement? And I guess specifically, which areas have the greatest impact when you're continuously improving them?
Oh, look, I'd say staff morale is the biggest one. Yep. Because if you've got people who enjoy working for you and want to come to work every day, they're also then invested in the outcome of your business, because it's not just a money job for them anymore. They want your business to thrive as well. And if you make sure that you're including time and space for them to say what's in their mind, give you ideas, talk about what's working really well for them and what's not, in a space where there's no judgment, you don't have to take action immediately, but you have a regular check-in with your staff that's relaxed and comfortable and not mandatory, because forcing people to come and give you feedback doesn't feel good either, but just having a relaxed, open environment in your business where people do feel like, yep, my experience is important. My opinion does count. I want to talk about whether or not I have the tools and resources to do my job properly, and just being open to that. As business owners, it's really easy to take feedback personally from the team that you're working with, and feel if somebody comes up and says, hey, this isn't really working, our natural inclination is to go, well, hang on a minute, you're just not doing it right. Here's why it should be working, right? Just take it in, take a break. This is the talking section, not the fixing section. Defining those times and having that relaxed atmosphere in that way, so much more effective than, say, having a pizza party every Friday, right?
Yeah, 100%. So, Marissa, we've spoken a lot about getting some great foundations in place. Obviously, we've spoken about profits, we've spoken about processes, we've spoken about continuous improvement. What I wanted to ask you about is that transition from, I guess, a role that's not really scaled, or a business that hasn't really scaled, to one that does scale. What are the sticking points? What are the hurdles that you see that you think, oh, wow, if we could just fix this, or if they just knew how to do that, that would kind of set them free to have much more free time, much more enjoyment, the money and the time, rather than the money or the time?
Okay. Letting go is a big one. Ego is a bit of a big one. That feeling like, but nobody can do it the way I can.
Yeah. Okay.
That's a really big one. And that's why I love processes, because once you've got processes, you realize actually people can do it the way that I do it, or can do it in a way that's effective. But you can't scale without processes, and it's very difficult to scale without a team that you trust to do actions the way the process says it. So I'm always going to come back to that as the foundational part, but then also just letting go and it really is kind of a mindset thing. Is that whole, I need to trust the people that I'm working with, but I need to take the step and not be there for that, take the time off. You don't really get the confidence to take time off and have more freedom until you force yourself to take more time off and have more freedom. And you can ease yourself into it. Maybe you want to go to a business conference, and that's your testing the waters and seeing how everything goes. But you're still being productive as a business owner, so you don't have to feel guilty about not being there 24/7. Or it might be you're going to take a slightly longer lunch or go to your kids' school thing. You've actually got to jump in and do it in order to have it feel like it's more normal to do that. So you need staff you trust. You need processes that are easy to follow. You need to see that that's working well, but then you just need to let go. You need to jump in.
It's funny you should say that. One of our clients, Barry, is one of our boardroom members. The joke with him is he's never at work. And it never started out like that. But he did exactly what you said. He'd go away for a week or a weekend. He'd try and set the team up for success as best he could before he went. He'd come back, see what didn't work, create the process to fix what didn't work, and then just keep going through that cycle over and over and over again until ultimately now he does work, but not very much at all. And he's always on holidays. He's always going things, and his income has continued to grow. And it's been a really interesting process to observe him do exactly what you said. And so it really works, ladies and gents. So if you're listening to this, do this because it works, okay? Marissa's just said it, and it really does work well. So, Marissa, what other things do you think practice owners should be mindful of as they go on their scaling journey?
I think there's a danger in trying to be too efficient with systems and processes and scaling.
Okay. Tell me about that. Because in some ways efficiency sounds amazing, but I'm curious to understand and explore too efficient.
I've had a couple of clients in the past who have absolutely systemized everything they can and automated everything they can. And for the first year or so that they did that, customer service, scheduling, payments, all the things that do sound great to systemize and automate, it was great. And they did have short-term freedom as a result, but the customer experience started to suffer then at that point. What they were leaving out was a regular check-in to see how things were going.
So you've got to systemize and then humanize a bit too.
Yeah. You've really got to look at, okay, and this is why I think asking for feedback from your patients and your customers is really important. And you don't have to put pressure on them and ask them on the spot, what's working well and what's not. It can be as easy as encourage them to leave a review or refer another person. If you're not getting regular good reviews or testimonials or referrals from existing clients, there's a gap in your business. There's a problem with your customer experience and nobody wants to say it to your face. Yeah. And sometimes that can be as a result of we've systemized too much, we've automated too much, or we just haven't checked in on a regular basis with our team and with our practice to see if things are actually feeling good as they're rolling along. Yeah, okay. I think that's the biggest hiccup I've seen.
Alrighty. So, Marissa, as we kind of tie this conversation to a nice bow, if you were to have, I guess, the gospel according to Marissa, if we could, the simplify and scale gospel, what would be, the two or three things that you think are the really key bullet points, the headlines that you want people to take away from this conversation?
When you're talking about running a successful business, I think, and you're looking at, say, your business model, for example, I think the business model that's going to give you the best results, the best cash flow, the best profits, the best income, and more freedom at the same time is the one that is easy to consistently action. It's the one that feels good to consistently action. So when you're looking at things that you're doing to increase your profitability, and that could be anything from bringing in new customers, retaining the existing customers and upselling to them, or even just in terms of stock management, so you're reducing your loss of money as well, or time management, so you're not wasting time and wasting money that way. You've got to look at the areas that feel good to you. That sounds a little bit woo-woo, doesn't it?
No, but it makes perfect sense because it's going to be sustainable if you enjoy it. And if you don't enjoy it, it's just not going to stick.
Exactly. And don't leave one thing out. Don't only focus on profitability. Don't only focus on continuous improvement. Don't only focus on your processes. It's got to be a holistic thing. So, put out those short-term fires and think, what's not working well in my business? Do that short term, but build space into your week, build space into your day to look at all three of those components so that they can balance themselves out. If you're only focused on profits, you'll be turning over staff way too quickly, right? And then you'll be spending money advertising, recruiting, training new staff. That's where that can fail. If you only focus on continuous improvement, then you're not looking at your pricing or your customer experience, and that's going to suffer. And if you're only focusing on processes, you can have that rigid automated feel that loses all of that comforting, nurturing experience that you want your practice to provide to your customers. So they do all balance out well. But I think if I had to tell people one thing, it's that giving yourself time to consider these things on a regular basis is really going to make the biggest difference in your practice. Moving from reaction to being proactive on how you're looking at your practice is really going to be the key to more sustainability and more freedom and more cash flow in the long run. And giving yourself that time. You know, we feel like we shouldn't because we feel like we have to be actively working all the time and role modeling that as a business leader. But giving yourself permission to take a little bit of a break. It's like that classic, you know, you have your best ideas when you're in the shower or when that downtime actually can be the most creative and productive time that you have. So don't disservice yourself by leaving that out.
Yeah, I really, really love that. I think you've got to give yourself that little bit of time on a regular basis just to let your brain decompress and to think and to be creative and get into that kind of that headspace. Because it is a different headspace to doing tasks and being in it all day. Yeah. So I love that. Now, Marissa, you've been a really kind and generous guest today. I know for people listening to the show, they can head across to marissaroberts.com, and I know you've got a 3-part audio series there, which, ladies and gents, I'd encourage you to grab a hold of. It's a really good audio series. It's full of practical tips and tools and strategies that'll help you simplify and scale. And now, Marissa, is there anything that they should also look for on your website? Any other particular resources that spring to mind that'll help the listener here today?
Oh, I do have a whole page of resources on the website. So you can go to marissaroberts.com/resources and you'll find a ton of things, you know, everything from a list of simpler business tools that I use to free myself up. That's a really good one that people love. And there's other things like how to handle tricky situations, email templates. If you find yourself wasting time sending emails back and forth in your business, there's a bunch of templates that can help save you time, effort, and stress there. So yeah, resources page is the best place to go to.
Perfect. All right. Well, Marissa, once again, thank you so much for joining us on the show today. It's been a pleasure to get to talk to you. Enjoy the Newcastle vibe up there. I'm a little bit green with envy because it is such a good spot, but have a good Christmas and look forward to talking to you soon.
You too. Thank you.
Thank you for listening to the Savvy Dentist podcast. For more episodes, go to drjessiegreen.com/savvydentist. And to discover how to build a high-performance dental practice, visit drjessiegreen.com and download the free report.